do, but this one is going to go over some things in Fantasy Grounds, namely combat. Before I get started, can't fail to mention that there is the 20th anniversary sale for Fantasy Grounds. It is now April 26, 2024. The sale ends on May 5th. So these discounts, I don't think I've ever seen these in this amount. So normally the ultimate license is 150 bucks. So now it's like 50. This is US dollars, by the way. And the standard license is 20 bucks. And if you're going to upgrade from the standard to the ultimate license, that's $30. I don't think I've ever seen that pricing in regards to licenses. So this would be the time to pick them up, you guys. I'll have the links in the description. And also, if you are already an owner of Fantasy Grounds, perhaps you will become an affiliate in which you can help promote the platform and that sort of thing. So I'll have a link for that as well in the same area. So hopefully you can take advantage of the sale. This is on Steam also. And I know that Paulette, or we know her as Belle, has posted this in different areas as well. So this is a big deal, folks. So what we're going to be looking at today is obviously Fantasy Grounds. We're looking at the 5th edition rule set. Kind of have everything in position, ready to go, but I'm going to explain all this stuff in the course of an hour, I hope. And hopefully this will help you guys out in the long run. I thought I would do a more recent setup, since after all the changes and all the things that have gone on over the last month or so with Fantasy Grounds and the standardization, which is still in progress right now. But basically, I have a map, characters, encounters, that sort of thing. And what we're looking at here is the Fantasy Grounds Atlassian. So this is your resource guide for whatever rule set. So if you come to the Fantasy Grounds Atlassian, which is kind of like their wiki guide, if you click on content, you click the down arrow, you'll get all these different options here. So there's like quick start guides, how to install, setting up and updating, how to host a game, how to join a game, and it's the basic guides, which is going to basically cover lighting, the map tools, because that's kind of universal to Fantasy Grounds. So it's not just D&D, but this is where you would learn about, how to use maps and the dice and, some of those sort of things. But when you're actually drilling down into the rule set itself, you have a section called, this is the available rule sets is what they call that. So available rule sets, if you click on that, it's going to take you to all the main compatible or the supported rule sets. And in this case, we're going to talk about DnD5e, but when you look at this will get into the campaign options, which you can turn things on and off in your campaign. It talks about the character sheets, the combat tracker. It does go into the automation if you're into that. It tells you how to deal with items and treasure parcels. Also how to understand and set up these NPCs and encounters. It goes over the party sheet, and then there's some tutorial videos. So we're going to touch on a lot of these. We're not going to necessarily get too deep into the character sheets or the automation or the parcels, but we will be talking about NPCs and encounters. We're talking about the party sheet, combat tracker, and the campaign options. So those are the things that we're going to be looking at in this particular thing. When I have a encounter set up so that we can kind of go through some of this stuff, and hopefully it'll inspire you or at least give you an idea of what to do when you first start using the platform. So without further ado here, there's a setting in Fantasy Grounds that will help you maintain whatever it was that you were working on last. So if I go into the options, which is this gear cog on the right, and I go into these settings, there is a setting here called Desktop Restore Windows on Start. If you turn that on, what will happen is when you come back into Fantasy Grounds, everything will still be here. So let's, I don't want to do that now, but I was going to try to, go back to the start and then start back in. But basically when this pops back up, all this stuff should be in place. So that's what that option is for. And I have this set up a certain way. You'll find a good way that works for you, depending on your screen real estate and what size your monitor is and what kind of content you're running in your rule set. But essentially, this is kind of how I set up my table every time. So over here on the right, you can expand or you can contract the panel over here so that you have more room. Usually I'll put the map up here in the top right corner. I'll leave this little sliver here for NPCs and for characters. And then down below is the campaign data, like the reference manuals or the storybooks or any of this kind of extra stuff. So this is basically how I set it up. And if you leave it this way, it will stay that way. So in other words, if I accidentally close these now that I've already dragged them over and put them in place, when I click on the links on the combat tracker here on the right, they'll go right where I left it. Same thing with this map. So if I drag this record, the shortcut down to the hotkeys, and I accidentally close that, when I open that back up, it's going to open up where I left it. And that's one of the biggest takeaways for Fantasy Grounds when you first get started, because it's going to piss you off initially, because it's difficult to understand what's happening and you're trying to manage the windows and you got like 50 gazillion things open. So what you want to do is start learning where you want to place these windows, and you get a pretty good flow and understanding of what that might entail and what the windows are. You're not going to know right away, but as the campaign grows or as you get familiar with Fantasy Grounds, you're going to know which stuff you need and what stuff is, not as important. The other thing to mention is that all of these characters are already pre-built. So I went in and made all these. I'm not going over character creation, but that's one of the first things I advise that you learn how to do and do it well, is to create characters. Once you understand that process, when it comes down to helping your players and to managing your table, it really gives you a good grasp on how Fantasy Grounds works and all the little ins and outs of different character builds. That takes time. There's no quick way to do it, but this is probably the most important aspect, I think, of Fantasy Grounds, is knowing how to build a good character. I don't mean good as in role-playing or good as in how you've built it, but good as in your understanding of how it interfaces with the rule set and with Fantasy Grounds. That's very important. Once you get that down and your players start getting familiar with it, it makes everything a lot smoother. I would learn that actually before I even worried about combat or anything else, because that really does slow the game down, especially if you're not familiar with the character sheets and those sort of things. So the next thing I wanted to talk about is adding your characters to the combat tracker. So once you have the characters built, you can drag them to a map directly now. You used to have to put them on the combat tracker first and then put them on the map, but technically now you can drag them to the map and they'll automatically populate to the combat tracker. So that's kind of a new thing. Used to be that you would have to put it on the combat tracker first and then put it on the map. I still do that out of habit, but you don't have to do it now. You can directly drag them to this map, provided it's connected to the game or that it's shared with your players and that sort of thing. So if I share this map, I'm going to right click on the record on the top or anywhere on the map, go to sharing, and you can hit stop sharing or share record. Once you share that, it pushes the map to your players. So once that happens, then they'll be able to see their tokens on the map. If for some reason they accidentally close this, if on their character sheet they open this up and they double click on, I believe, it's in the combat tracker. So over here on the left where their token is, if they double click on that, that will bring up the map that they were on last. So that's how they can bring that up. That's a good shortcut. It used to be that you could do it on here, but I think that functionality has changed because of the way they changed tokens. Because now you have a profile picture, a flat token, and a 3D token. So that's kind of new too. So the next thing is to have all of these characters stacked here like a deck of cards. So whenever I click on these, it brings up the character. So every time I go down this list, if I click on this link on the far right here in the combat tracker, it's going to bring that character sheet up to the top. The other thing is I also do that with NPCs once they become a part of the map. So this is an encounter that was built in Fantasy Grounds. There's all the tokens. Here's the representation of the NPCs. You click this open, you get the stat blocks, depending on what you have. So those are just, some preliminary things. I'm not going to go into how to build an encounter, but most encounters are already built for you. And they're usually linked to a map or to a story entry in Fantasy Grounds. So I'm going to right click on the map, go to View, and Zoom to Fit, which is going to recenter the map for me. Up here on the top here, I have this little link here. This is a link to this particular ambush, which is an encounter. So if I accidentally close this, all I have to do is click on that. It'll bring up the encounter. There's two ways you can handle an encounter. If they're not already placed on a map, you can place them at this point before you even have anyone join the table. Or you can simply drag these guys you can send or add to tracker, and then from there you can drag them onto the map. So that would be more for like a random encounter, but if you want the encounter set up where you don't have to do anything with it, you can individually drag these little tokens here to the map where you want them to show up when it's time for combat or time for the encounter. So not every combat is an encounter, and not every encounter is a combat, but nonetheless. So I'm going to set them up over here in this shadowy area. So each one of these bandits, I'm going to put them in position. So there's one there, and as you place them, this little check mark checks itself off. So there's one there. There'll be one over here, and then the bandit captain will be right there. So this is their little group, their little squad. They're going to try to ambush the players as they come out of this tavern. That's kind of what the scenario is. So these guys went in there to get some information. They got some food, had a couple drinks. Now they're coming outside, and somebody in the tavern tipped them off that these guys were in here. So these guys are hiding outside of the tavern. Now the players will not be able to see this once I have this in place. Right now I'm still in the middle of setting it up. These little check marks indicate that they're already placed on the map. So once you do that, if I close this encounter, they're going to disappear off here, but they're still there technically. So if I close this, they're going to disappear off the map, but they are actually still placed. Once we have people joining the table and they claim their characters and we get to playing, each one of these tokens will be claimed by one of your players in most cases. And as you click on these tokens, you're able to see through the eyes of that particular character that is claimed. And what I have here in the settings on the map is the fact that this has the lighting enabled. This is without the player vision on. So this is like a hybrid of the GM and the player. When I turn that back on, this is the actual player view. So this gives me an idea. So when I deselect, that shows me the whole map. When I select, that shows me the map in the eyes of this particular character or NPC, whatever it might be. So as the GM, it can get a little confusing. So if you accidentally click on it again, you see everything. If you click on it and claim it, then you only see through the eyes of that particular character. So this player preview is helpful for different reasons. I usually play with it on, and that way when I click on a token, I can immediately see what they need to see. And if I want to look at the whole map, a preview of it so I know where I am in reference to everything else, I'll hit Control P and that will reveal the whole map. So you can do it that way. Or you can just simply deselect and it will show you the rest of the map. So as you click on different tokens, it's going to change the view because you're looking at through the eyes of a different player or NPC. So once these guys come out of the tavern, we're going to spring this combat on them. But before we do that, I want to show you some options that may or may not matter to you. So in Fantasy Grounds, regardless of the rule set, you're going to have some campaign options. There's a few options here that might interest you when it comes to running a 5e game. So for instance, in this first section per user, there's turn auto center map. That's turned on. So what that means is every time I advance the combat tracker, it's going to move the map to center on whoever is turn it is in the combat tracker. That's not a bad thing for players and such maybe, but for me, I turn it off because I don't want the map to move unless I want it to move. So I turn it off for me. This is a per user thing. So as the players are loading in, and if they want to turn that off, they can. So the next thing that I wanted to show you was the show dice tower. So I don't have the dice tower turned on right now, but if you want to use it, you can turn it on here. It will appear at the bottom right corner. You right click on it, unlock this, and you can move it wherever you want if you want, or leave it there. I usually put it next to the dice so I can find it and I'm not looking for it. And then I'm going to right click and lock it so it doesn't get moved. And now when you do a dice roll, if you want any of your players to see that, or be hidden rolls, like if you want them to roll inside the dice tower, only the GM will see the result. So this is a storytelling tool, a way to kind of cut down a little bit on metagaming and kind of like the element of surprise type thing. That way not all the rolls have to be out in the open. I don't recommend doing attack rolls and damage, but skill checks, hidden dice rolls. And if you're worried about giving away the ghost in this case, you could just drop one in there randomly, even though it doesn't mean anything, and that'll freak your players out. They'll see the dice shadow, but they won't see any results. They'll wonder why you're rolling. So that's a good way to trick them. So I'll usually drop a 10-sided in there, or I'll drop a 20 in there just randomly. So just kind of keep them on their toes. So now the next thing we're going to be looking at is when you are in the middle of combat, there's a couple things that can change. So for combat, this is a DnD5e rule set, by the way. Auto NPC initiative. So by default, it's set to group. So whenever I add the NPCs to the combat tracker, they all go on the same initiative, depending on what they are. So in the case of our encounter, I have the 3 bandits and the captain. So the 3 bandits will go together and the captain will go. So based on the groups, that's how they're set up, is in group. However, if you want to turn it off completely and you want to roll, from scratch, you want to do it yourself, you can turn it off. Or if you just turn it on and it's not set to group, it'll roll individually for all of the NPCs at once. So it just depends on what your preference are. So as soon as I add these guys to the combat tracker, it's going to automatically roll their initiative and it's going to place them on the map. So I'll do that right now. So I'm going to recenter the map so you can see what's going on. So they should appear over here on the top right. And I've already got them placed. So I'm going to go ahead and hit this add to tracker. And what that does is it sends them over, and they already have their initiatives rolled, but they all have kind of different initiatives. Once in a while, they'll roll the same thing, but usually they're different rolls. So the bandit captain in this case is the first one to go in round 1. So he's going to go this first round. He'll be the first one to go. So that's kind of how this works. And then if you don't want them all to have the same hit points, you can also change that. So if you scroll down further into your options and you want to go into the house rules, combat NPC hit points, it's set to standard. So what that does is on the stat blocks, they have a standard hit points. But in parentheses over here, you notice they have this dice range. So what will happen is if you turn that off and you go to either max or random, it'll either give them the maximum hit points available, or you can have it roll randomly. So I'm going to go ahead and remove these guys off of the combat tracker temporarily to show you that. So right now the bandit captain has 65 hit points and all the other bandits have the same 11. So if you want that to be varied and you don't want them all to have the exact same thing, you can change that option so when you add them to the combat tracker, they have a random amount of hit points, whether it's a little higher or a little lower or the same, but at least there'll be a little variation in there. So to get rid of anything on this combat tracker, you want to click on menu, go to delete from tracker, and in this case, delete only foes. So that's just going to temporarily delete them off. Now I'm going to change this combat hit points to random. So what that does is when I add them this time, they'll have different hit points. Sometimes they'll have the same, but not as often. So I'm going to go ahead and hit this add to tracker. That'll put them back on. They're hidden, by the way, when you first put them on there. They're not visible to the players yet. and they'll be in their position where you left them. So in this case, now the bandit captain has 63 hit points instead of 65. The rest of them have random. So we have a 6, we have a 17, and we have a 9. So that gives a little bit of variability between different NPCs, especially if they're the same type. So that's that. The other thing that might come into play is your diagonal distance. So when you move a token and you got the token lock on, which is usually on by default, when you click this and the player moves, it's going to create that path. In order to emulate this as a GM, you have to hold the Alt key. Otherwise, you can just move it without. So when you have this movement path, that's 30 feet. And then the GM would click this little green button to approve the movement, and it moves. However, if you were going to change the way this works in diagonal distance, you would change this to a different parameter. So in this case, it's not going to make a difference because at 1.5 times, it's only going to count this as 30 feet in this case. So I'm going to cancel the movement and I'm going to do a diagonal move and I'm going to show you the difference. So 1.5 times is a little bit more accurate because it takes in compensation when you move diagonally. So I'm going to move this guy diagonally by holding the Alt key and dragging him over diagonally. So this is essentially, according to this is 30 feet. Okay, so this is 1.5 times. Now, if I turn it back to the standard, that's only 25 feet, and that would give the player an extra 10 feet of movement. So depending on what your rule set is and what your preferences are, if you don't want to count diagonal movement as, every other square is 10 feet, then you just leave it as it is, or leave it at 1 by. If you put on 1.5, it's going to more accurately track what the movement is depending on the diagonal distance. So if you think of a triangle, the longest side gets calculated at 1.5 times. Pythagorean's theorem, you get it. So that's basically the main settings that will change your game when it comes to running combat. Those can be left as default. You don't have to change them. But if you want a little bit more, you can change those up. There's nothing wrong with you coming in here and manually just changing them if you have to on the fly. So if you click in one of these cells, you can just change it if you want. But it's a lot cleaner if you're able to do it ahead of time and you're able to set it up in the options so you don't have to mess with it. But that's just a kind of like your settings in Fantasy Grounds. And then also, you want to set up your group on the party sheet. So before anything happens, you can drag all of your players onto the party sheet. And what that does is it gives you an overall view of your group. And it even shows who has dark vision. It shows the AC up here and their passive perception down here. And what you can do with something like this is you have like a roles down here that you can do group roles. So let's just say, let's go back to the scenario here where we're actually playing. So as a GM, if I wanted to, let's say these guys are hiding. So I'm going to make one stealth roll for the whole group. So I'll go with the captain since he's the highest ranking member here. And as you can see, as I click these NPC stat blocks, they're going to be right smack dab in the middle. And that's what Fantasy Grounds does. Is when you vary, the first time you open something, it's always going to be in the middle. So what you want to get in the habit of is moving it over and placing it where you want it to be from here on out. So now that I have his sheet open, if I accidentally close it and I open it, it's going to now open where I want it, not in the middle of the screen. So get in the habit of moving your windows when you're done or when you want to have them appear and not be in the middle of the screen or somewhere where you don't want it. So this is the actual leader. He doesn't really have a stealth proficiency, but I'm going to go ahead and roll just a dex check. So there's a save and a check, so this little letter C. So I'm going to have him roll. That's going to be basically his stealth. Okay, so he rolled a 9. So he's the first one to go in their group. And he's going to be barking orders anyway, so maybe he's not that loud. Maybe he's like, hey guys, get ready, but he's not really being that quiet. So that's a 9. I probably would have dragged that into the dice tower so the players don't see that number. So maybe this time, ooh, I rolled a 20 that time. So maybe that's that's their stealth check, but we'll go with the 9. So 9 was their stealth, okay? So with that in mind, the passive perception of the party from the party sheet is an average of these. So we have 12, 18, or 13, 13, 13, 13, 10. So roughly around 12. So I think the players would know they're there, even though they're trying to be quiet and they're around the corner. So perhaps the players heard him say, get ready, lads, or something like that. So as you go down the combat tracker, you can reveal who can see who. So in this case, if I click on this noble, he still can't physically, well, I think he can see this guy here, but it's in dim lighting. So that's, part of the issue there. So it's dim lighting. He can see him, but not very well. He just sees his shadow or the form. But for instance, this guy can kind of see him, but this female wizard cannot see him very well, but she might be able to see this one. So that's what this lighting is good for, is kind of gives you that point of view, the ability to see or not see depending on what's going on. So this is just a way that you can tell like who can see what. So this is just an idea so that you can kind of determine who goes and who can react and who can see who. So if that's the case, I would reveal this particular guy, and over here this is bandit number 1, so I'd probably reveal him too. So at least these two are visible by the furthest, and you can actually see bandit 2 also, so I might reveal him as well. But that's just kind of that's up to you how you want to manage that. But anyways, the bandit captain is going to go first. So what I'm going to do is he's going to have the parry ability. So he gets to add +2 to his armor class against one melee attack that would hit. So if anyone gets close to him, he's going to parry. So he's just going to hold his attack and tell the others to get ready. And basically, I think he'll move back just so he's out of range. So what I'm going to have him do, maybe he's kind of a coward. So if I want to track his movement as the GM, I'm going to hold the Alt key. I'm going to move him back out of view. So he's going to quietly, moving half of his movement rate, back here. So now these guys can't see him. He's out of the sight. So that's his turn. So he says, get ready, lads. They're out there. Prepare yourselves. Draw your weapons, whatever. He draws back. And then he pulls out his scimitar. So he's ready to go. He's going to watch this back area in case someone comes out the front door. So that's his MO right now. So that's basically his turn, almost a non-turn. He's just kind of setting up and preparing for the worst. So that's his move. So now when the player's turn happens, if you're using this this tabletop list up here, now you can see all the people that are part of this combat. This was the bandit captain right here. If you use this little arrow, or you can use a down arrow here, you can actually use that, and that will advance to the next player, so you can see you've highlighted that player. The thing about this is that the vision is still clicked on the bandit. So if I want to see what this player sees on her turn, I need to click on that token. And the only one that she can see is bandit 1. Okay? So that's kind of basically what the confusion can be when you first start using Fantasy Grounds, is who can see what. And also if you're not clicking on the token at the time, it'll be hard to tell who's looking at what. If you want to deselect, that'll show all of everything. But if you click on a token, then you get an idea what the player can see. In this case, it's bandit 1. So what I'm going to do is bring up her character sheet as the player would, and it's already on the actions tab. So she's got some options here. She's got a longbow, so I'm going to have her target this individual and shoot him with his bow. But I also wanted to mention that she has a fighting style of archery, which is giving her a +2 on attack. So she has a trait here that is automated in this case, and it has ATK:2, ranged, and it's on herself. So this will mean that this will be a permanent thing. So whenever she uses a ranged weapon, it will give her that bonus. So being that she has that bonus, as a player, I'm going to hold down the control key and then I'm going to click on the bandit. And what that does is it targets that particular bandit. And when it's her turn, all she has to do is double click on the attack roll. And if it's successful, then she'll double click on the damage. So let's see what happens. So she's going to shoot. And luckily, she's kind of shooting in between. She's not shooting her own ally, and this guy's shorter anyways. So I don't think it's going to be a problem. However, if this line went right through it, then that means she's shooting through her ally. In that case, I would probably impose a -2 penalty because he's kind of in the way. But in this case, not so much. And it's not clipping the building or anything, so she's got an open shot. So that's just something you want to look at in case if you want to do something tactical. So now that individual's targeted, I'm going to double click on the attack roll. It will check off the ammo. And in this case, it recorded as a hit, so 10 + 7 because she has the +2 and she has a good dex. So that's why that number is so good. So she does hit in that case. So she takes the bow out, pulls back on it, and lets loose. Now, I could have imposed a penalty for dim lighting, but in this case, I think there's just enough light, so I'm not going to impose that. But I would probably do a -2 penalty if that was the case. In this case, I think she can see him kind of all right, at least enough to target him. She may not be able to make out his face, but she can definitely see him enough to target him. So she's just trying to hit his form, not his face. So that is basically her attack roll, and now I'm just going to double click for damage. It only rolled 1, but she gets a +3 from her dex bonus, so a total of 4 damage, and that is actually recorded in the combat tracker down here. So that individual is wounded. So that's basically how a turn would go for one player. So once that player's done, they can advance the tracker by either clicking on this button here, or they can click the down arrow. So in this case, we're just going to advance the turn. Now it's going to this hill dwarf who's standing right here. So I'm going to click on his sheet just so I can get a look at what he has. He has Dwarven Resilience, which is resistance to poison, so he only takes like half damage. And there's a note here that he gets advantage on saving throws versus poison on top of that. So it's very hard to poison a dwarf. So I'm going to bring up his sheet, which I've done. So now he can decide, does he want to attack? Does he want to cast a spell? This is a cleric, by the way. I think he's going to cast a spell. So he's only first level, so he only can bless 3 people at a time. Normally what he does is he will bless the squishy people, so he being one of them. So he's going to bless himself, he's going to bless the elf, and probably the Lightfoot rogue, and they're all within his range. So if you weren't sure how far he can cast, the player can open up the bless spell. The range is 30 feet, and it requires concentration. So when I cast the spell, it's automatically going to put this little C on there, which will entail that it requires concentration. And if he takes damage, Fantasy Grounds will automatically roll to see if he maintains concentration. So that's kind of a cool thing that the combat tracker does, and that spell. So I'm going to go ahead and cast Bless. So I'm going to check off one of these spell slots because that's a manual process there. And then I'm going to take and drag this Bless, the one that says Self. I'm just going to click on that because he's going to bless himself. And then I'm going to click on 2 targets. So I'm going to hold down the control key and click on the High Elf. And I'm going to click on, wait, hold on here. So control key, control key. Okay, so he has those two targeted. So once that happens, there's the effect. So there's that, and then you could also drag that button if you want onto him, because he's also got that effect. So it's got ATK 1d4, which is attack, and save 1d4, and it lasts 10 rounds. So it keeps track of the rounds and the concentration. So that's essentially his turn, and I'm going to have him move back. So he hasn't moved yet. So I'm going to hold down the Alt key, move him back here, and approve it, because nothing's in the way. There's no tactical advantage there. So he's essentially kind of moving out of the way of the target. So he can still kind of see this guy here, but other than that, he's out of the picture. So that helps him down the road in case someone wants to target him with a missile weapon. So he does the bless and he steps back, lets the other guys take care of it. He's a good fighter, but he wants to preserve himself for healing and for assisting, so that he's playing his role essentially. So I'm going to have him pass the turn, so you can use this down arrow instead of using this one up here. So now it goes to the high elf. So she's uncertain what she wants to do. I'm going to click on her token. She can't see any of these targets. She's too close to the building. So with that in mind, she could move out here and then attack, but I think a wiser move for her would maybe be to cast a spell. So let's see what she has. So she has magic missile, mage armor, and then she has some melee weapons. So I'm going to do mage armor at this point, since she can't see anyone at this point. I'm going to go ahead and click on the spell slot to signify that she's used it. And I'm going to drag and drop the effect onto her. So now she has some extra AC. And that'll basically be her turn. And I'm going to have her step back too. So I'm going to move her next to the rogue. And that is going to also help him out in the long run to keep hidden. So I'm going to go ahead and hold down the Alt key, move her back. So she's going to move right there. And then as the GM, I'll approve it. So that's her move. That's her turn. She's done. She's going to pass her turn, goes to the next actor. So bandit number 3 saw his friend take a hit, saw that arrow. So he's kind of upset. He's mad that his friend got hurt, but he's going to go ahead and move. So I'm going to hold down the Alt key, move him up, and move him over. He's going to move out in the open, which I don't think is a wise idea, but he wants the full breadth of what he's got. Tells his friends there's quite a few of them out here. So that's one thing he does, is he lets his friends know that there's a lot of targets out there. If I double click on his token, that's going to bring up the stat block. Now, there again, smack dab in the middle. So whenever you see that, move it to where you want it to go, stretch it out, size it, whatever, and be done with it. Then leave it there. So he does have a ranged weapon, and I'm going to have him target the noble. So it's his turn, so I'm going to go ahead and click on the noble. And I'm going to go ahead and target the noble. So I want to make sure the bandit is selected, and then I'm going to hold down the control key, and that will target the noble. So this guy is targeting him. And now his light crossbow is right here. The range is 80, 30, 320 for long range. And then attack roll +3. So if I double click on that, that's going to execute the attack roll. So he takes out his light crossbow, click, pop, it hits him. And now I'm going to roll for damage. We're rolling really low. So he did 2 points of damage. So it essentially grazed his shoulder. And, there's like a little blood comes out, but nothing big. So that's his turn. So he moved out, moved his maximum movement rate, took a pop shot at this fighter. And so that's his turn. So now the fighter has to decide, does he want to get into the thick of this, or does he want to hang back? Being that he's a human noble, he's kind of brave, he's not really too concerned, I'm going to have him move up there and attack. So he's going to move into the melee range and just start kicking butt. He does have a shield, but I removed the shield bonus because he's using a two-handed weapon. So that's an effect that's on him temporarily, because you're not supposed to really benefit from a shield bonus if you have it equipped. The right way to do it is to go into inventory, and unequip it. However, in the heat of the battle, or if you're new to Fantasy Grounds, it may or may not click to do that when you're using a two-handed weapon. So what I've done is made an effect that just the player clicks on it, it removes the bonus until they decide they want to re-equip the shield. This is just a kind of a workaround, kind of a convenience thing. It's not necessary. But anyhow, he's getting ready to move into battle, so I'm going to target the rogue just to see how far away he is. So I'm not necessarily going to attack, but it's his turn, so I want to do the same, and I want to target this rogue. And is this guy, I don't think he's, Bandit 3 is not visible, so I need to make him visible so that he can be targeted. And now he is targeted. You can't target him unless he's visible on the combat tracker. So now that he's targeted, now I can see that he's 50 feet away. So I'm not going to rush up into battle. In this case, I might get closer. So what I'll do is I'll move closer to the building, and then I'll take a pop shot at him. So what I'll do is move up to the maximum of my movement. So I'm going to hold down the Alt key as the GM, because I don't have, as a player, I can just move it and it'll make that trail. But in this case, I'm the GM, so I have to keep track of it. So I move there, and then I'm going to move up the rest of my turn. So the reason I did it that way is so it cuts off the angle, so I don't open myself up to more attacks. And it gets me a little closer, so if they come around that corner, I can thump them. And in this case, since that guy is kind of not in my melee range, I'm going to take one of my javelins and huck it at him. So here's the throne. So I'm just going to run up and just heave one of these javelins at him. So I don't necessarily have to have him targeted at all, but in this case, since he already is, I'm going to go ahead and double click on the attack roll. And in that case, that struck him. So that thing went flying. It probably struck him right square in the chest. And now I'm going to double click the damage and see what happens. So he's dying. So that individual just took enough damage to take him out. He's prone, unconscious, so he's dead on the ground essentially. If he's not a main NPC or somebody I think is going to be resurrected or anything, I will remove him off the combat tracker to declutter it and to make it cleaner so it's not a big mess. So I'm going to go ahead and remove him. I don't think any of these guys have healing potions. There's nobody around that's going to heal him. So I'm just going to double click on this little line here, and that gets rid of him off the combat tracker, and it leaves this little blood splatter. So you'll know where his body was. So if you go to loot something later, you can see the blood spots where their bodies were. That's where the loot is, or if there is any. So now that that's happened, I'm going to go ahead and end his turn. But it did keep track of the one javelin that I threw at him. So that guy's laying on the ground with a javelin sticking out of him, straight up in the air. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the next actor. Now it's the Lightfoot Rogue. So he doesn't really like to get himself into too many messes. So I'm going to have him move back 5 feet. He's just going to step back into the shadows in the corner, put himself so that he can't be surrounded, because that's kind of how he is. I'll go ahead and approve that since he ain't moving very far. And he's going to perform the hide action. So on his sheet, I have a standard action. This is basically a note, but I'm going to click on hide. And he's going to pull out his short bow and basically wait. So if anyone comes into view, he's going to try to perform a sneak attack. So basically, he's shooting for shape. He's just getting set up for it. So he's hiding. I'm going to have him roll a stealth check. If he remains still and he's not moving, I'm going to have him do a stealth check. Now, in this case, he has his skills here, and this is going to be a stealth check. I would have him drag and drop this into the dice tower as a player, and then only I would see that roll. So the result is 23. When I look at any of the stat blocks for these thugs, none of them have a very high passive perception. So he's hidden as far as I'm concerned. Unless he moves or someone outs him or something, he's hidden. He's kind of crouched down. He's next to this barrel. He's got his ally in front of him, kind of blocking the way. So he's pretty well hidden down in this little corner. So I'm not too worried about him. He's staying put. He's just got his bow out. He's ready for action. So if he wasn't, moving and all that, I would let him just go ahead and get a free attack next round. But since he's just kind of hiding there, he'll get to go on the next turn. So I'll go ahead and if it comes up where right now he has the hide action, if it comes back to his turn, then he basically it would have to expire if he moves again. So it will expire after one round. So he's hiding this round. So bandit number 2 is going to be a little bit more careful. And what I'm going to do is click on his token and move him over to the edge. And he's going to take a peek around. He's going to be a little bit more cautious than his friend. So again, I'm going to hold the Alt key, move him over here, and right there. And then I want to also, he's not hidden, but he's on the edge there. So I can kind of see what he's looking at here. So he can pretty much see everyone except for the rogue. So I'm going to have him target this human folk hero. So I want to hold down the right control key. And now it's 60 feet away. So he's going to also use his light crossbow. So I'm going to have him double click on the attack roll, which is a ranged attack. He rolled an 11, plus 3 is 14, so that records this as a hit. So click, and then he pops the folk hero with one of his bolts, so we'll see how much damage it does. Ooh, that hurt. 9 points of damage out of her, what has she got? 12, so she's hurting. So that thing goes right into her chest. It just knocks the wind out of her. She's like gasping for air. There's probably blood coming up out of her throat or something, like she's spitting up blood. Not good. So he kind of snickers to himself, and he's kind of happy. He kind of whispers, I got one of them. So now I'm going to go to the bandit. So this one is going to come out as well, and he's going to do the same thing. I have him creep forward, and he's going to target the same target, unfortunately, or fortunate for him. He's going to do the exact same attack. They're going to go after her. Oh man, this doesn't look good. So I'm going to go ahead and double click damage. That was a hit. So again, click, pop, and she's down. So that the bandit took her out. She didn't even have a chance to really do much. I mean, she got her butt handed to her. So she's out. Now I'll leave her on there because I have allies in the area that have healing and such. So she might still have a chance. But he's happy. He snickers and he yells back to the captain, I got one of them. One of them's down. So that's there. So now the bandit captain comes out. He's going to move closer to the building. One of the guys tells him that there's somebody up here. So he's going to run to the target. So what I'm going to do is hold the Alt key, and he's going to basically move and run towards this target. The problem with that is he's got to run through his allies. He's going to lose 10 feet. He would normally get 40. But in this case, the max he can get is 30. So he can move to there, essentially. I might put him here just for the hell of it, since he basically foregoed one of his attacks. So he's right there. He's now visible. And he's basically going to take out his dagger and throw it. So I'm going to click on his stat block, which is already located here. He has a dagger that he can throw. So he's going to throw his dagger at the human. I'm not even going to bother targeting because he's only got one dagger. And there's two attacks here. There's a melee and a ranged. So I want to do the ranged attack. So he runs up, throws the... Oh, he can't attack. Never mind. That doesn't count because he moved double his movement rate, essentially. So he basically ran up there, but he didn't move double, so I'll give him it. So he went ahead and he threw it, and it did hit. And let's see what the dagger is. So he only moved 30 feet. So that's not a big deal. If he would have moved the full 60, then he would have got that turn. But he just kind of squeaked by here. I let him through. And now I'm going to go ahead and double click on, or drag the damage in this case to the target. And he took heavy damage. So these guys are, they're not playing around. They're pretty serious. So now this rolled automatically, and the human made a critical success on her death save. So she is now stable. She's still prone, laying on the ground, but she's recovering from her wound. So she's not dead anymore. She's got 1 hit point. When you roll a 20 on a death save, you essentially recover 1 hit point. So I didn't have to worry about her. So she's kind of like moaning, like, ugh, she's hurt, but it's probably coughing up blood and everything. But her natural recovery took over. So since that was her turn, essentially, kind of waking up from being conscious, I could ask her to, to state what she wants to do. I don't think she's really can do much. I might let her crawl like 5 feet in one direction or the other. So I'm going to just say she can move 5 feet. She's prone, so she's crawling basically down here. And that's her turn. That's all she can do. She can move 5 feet. She can kind of half roll or kind of like scoot herself over here. That makes for very cinematic play. You don't have to let that happen, but to make it kind of cool. I'll say, okay, yeah, you can. So she's crawling over to that wall for safety, and so she can pull herself up. And she's like choking on her own blood. That bolt is stuck in her lung somewhere. So that was her turn. So that's pretty cool that she made it. Now she does have second wind. So I could ask the player, do you want to use your second wind or not? And I'm going to go ahead and say yes. I'll let her do it since that was pretty gnarly. I want to keep the game going. I don't want her to die. So I'll let her use the second wind. And she only gets to use it once. So I'm going to roll. It didn't roll much, but it's enough. So basically she used that feature. And she's stable just enough to stand up. So I'm going to give her the benefit of the doubt. I'm going to remove the prone unless she wants to remain on the ground. You know what? I think she will. She's going to pretend that she's dead. Because she doesn't want to, if she stands up, she might just become another target. And they might go after her again. So she's going to stay on the ground. So we're going to leave it prone. So she's no dummy. She's like, you know what? I feel a little better, but, she's trying to recover. And she doesn't need another bolt in her back. So she's gonna pretend she's dead essentially. So they'll be less likely to go after her. So that's kind of a cool thing. So we'll go ahead and move this on. So now the dwarf, he goes, "Are you okay?" And so he kind of moves over to her. He kneels down and he says a prayer to his god. And can he do this? Yeah, this is a touch. So he's right there. So I'm going to have him drag and drop this heal onto her, and that she's now healthy again. And I'm going to check off the spell. So he doesn't have any more spell slots except for his cantrips. So the only offensive thing he has is Sacred Flame. He has a light spell, and then he has his gear. So I think what he's going to do is take out his crossbow, and that's basically his turn. So he basically helped his ally. So the high elf saw that, so she's not too happy. She's going to take a risk here and move out into the open a little more. So she saw her friend go down, so she's kind of doing this kind of out of frustration. So she's not thinking straight. So she moves out into the open, which is not a good move. And she's going to let a volley of her magic missiles. So she has magic missile. She has up to 3 targets. Automatic damage. There's no save unless they have like a shield or something like that. So they don't. So first missile takes this guy out. So he's dead. Whoever, let's see, this is bandit number 1. He had kind of low hit points and he already had damage earlier. So he's gone. Now the rest of the missiles. So I think she's going to target the leader. I don't know if she's smart enough to determine or if she knows he's the leader, but I think she's going to focus on him, at least for this second volley. And that wounded him, and since he's not down, she's going to burn her last missile on him, kind of soften him up a little bit. So that hurt him. So he's still got quite a few hit points, but that at least put the hurt on him. But that also gets rid of her spells. So now she has Mage Hand, Shocking Grasp, and Thunderclap. So she ain't got a whole lot. She does still have her magic armor, so that's good. So that's her turn. And she's going to actually move back. She's got 10 more feet. So she's going to step back 10 feet. So I'll have her move over sideways. So that will be holding down the Alt key, trying to cut off the angle, but it's not helping much in this case. All right, so the human noble is essentially in range, so he's going to move in. Let's see what he's got going on. So he's going to use his second wind. Is this a bonus action? Yes, it is. So as a bonus action, since he's already wounded, I'm going to go ahead and use his second wind. I mean, he healed some, but he's still kind of hurt. But he's good enough. He's got 4 hit points. He's kind of putting himself at risk. So kind of foolish, but he's going to go for it. So I'm going to have him move up to the captain. He's probably going to end up dying, but we'll see. So all fate. So I'm going to move up and then move here. And he's going to attack with a melee weapon. So he's got his great axe. So he's going to take this big swing at him. And remember, this guy has parry. So that is going to potentially be problematic. Let me read that again. So this guy has parry. So what does that do? So he adds +2 to only one melee attack that would hit. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll see if it hits first. And if it does, if that makes a difference, whether he gets hit or not, then we'll apply it. So first we'll just see if he gets hit, and then we'll worry about that later. So I'm going to go ahead and take the great axe and attack. So here's the attack roll. Oh yeah, so even if I add +2 to this guy's armor class of 17, it doesn't matter. It's still his parry. He tried to parry, but it's hard to parry against a big two-handed axe. So he put his arm up, probably got it hacked. So the great axe is coming down on him pretty hard. And in this case, he took 6 points of damage. So he's still hanging. He's pretty tough. So that's basically his the noble's return, his attack. All right, so the rogue is still hiding. He can't really see anybody. So what I might have him do is move up slowly, maybe another 10 feet, 15 feet. He can move half his movement rate. So I'm going to have him roll a stealth check, and he's going to move up. So I'm going to have him creep along this wall here. And I'll have him roll a stealth check in the dice tower. So he's moving slowly, and he's going to move into position. And I'll drag and drop this in here. And 17. So that beats their passive perception. So he's still kind of hidden. He can't really see them very well. You can see this guy kind of. But it wouldn't be a very good angle, but there's his turn. So he's moving in for the kill, essentially. All right, so this bandit is going to move up and attack the human noble. So instead of using his crossbow, now he's going to use his melee weapon. So he moves up, takes a slash at him, and he misses. So the human noble is able to kind of back off before that lands. So he kind of like dodges it, essentially. And now we're going to move up to the bandit captain. So the bandit captain is going to step in and use his scimitar as well. So he kind of comes in with a jab, like he's going to jab him. This might be the end of him, folks. No. So they both missed. Oh my God, they have good opportunities. So he steps in and tries to scissor in his scimitar, and it doesn't do anything to him. So that Unfortunately, that's that. Now, when you get into these kind of close combat things, I think it'd be kind of cool to switch to uh, the the token view or the camera view. So let's take a see what that looks like. So now that we're in the middle of this combat, you can kind of see what this looks like in this view. So when you get up to these closer battles, or you have a kind of a confined area, it's kind of cool looking to occasionally change the view. So the players can see this as well if they want to switch the view. So this allows you kind of get an angle. Now these guys look kind of funny because of the camera angle. So as you move the camera, they'll correct themselves. But when you're not the focus and you have it, targeted somewhere else, it makes them look kind of funny. And that's just because of the angle of the camera. All right, so he's done with his turn. That really pissed him off. But anyway, so this is the folk hero. So she's basically pulled herself up, so she's no longer prone. She's going to step back over to the side about 10 feet. So I'm going to kind of strafe her over. So she's going to be over here on the left. So I'm going to hold down the control key, move her over. So she's moved over 10 feet. And I'm going to go back to the regular view so I can get a better idea of the angle here. And I'm going to have her attack the bandit number 2. So does she have anyone targeted now? No. So I'm going to hold down the control key and click on the bandit. So now I'm going to have her execute her attack, which is the longbow. So again, there's a double click on here. And that's a 19, so that hit. And now I'm going to double click for damage. Yeah, so that guy's took heavy damage. So he staggers from that hit. That was pretty nasty. So he's got, let's see, he's still got a few hit points left, but he's getting hurt. That definitely took some damage off him. So now I'm going to go ahead and pass the turn. Now it's going to go to this cleric. So I'm going to move him up, so he can protect this wizard. So I'm going to have him run. Can you believe that? A dwarf running. Now I'll just have him move up. So holding the Alt key, I'm going to move him up to 25 feet. That's his maximum movement rate. I want to make sure he's untargeting, because right now he's got these guys targeted still from his bless spell. So to do that, I'm just going to hold the control key and unclick. And then I'm going to target bandit number 2, just like she did. And then I'm going to have him double click on his crossbow. So automatic miss. So he rolled a 1. So what I'll say is he loses the rest of his actions. And this is kind of a homebrew thing. And he kind of fumbled. He dropped his crossbow bolt, so it's kind of a wasted attack. So he I don't know, he fumbled or he got confused and discombobbled or whatever. And he dropped his crossbow or whatever, pulling it out and trying to load it. So he effed up there. But he was so excited, he wants to get into it. But he basically lost his turn. So that's what you get for rolling a 1. Okay, so she has really very few options. So she does have a crossbow. So what I'll do is I will have her target this bandit number 2. So I'm going to hold the control key. So it's her turn. I have her highlighted. Now, in this case, it looks like she'll be able to do it. I don't think it's cutting right through, but essentially I would give her a -2 penalty. But since he's moving around and it's not a static roll, I'll give her the benefit of the doubt. But like I said before, if it was going right through the target, I'd definitely give her a disadvantage or some kind of a -2 penalty to hit. But in this case, she's going to be shooting off to the side, like over his shoulder, essentially. So that will be, or off to the side, essentially. So what I'll do is go ahead and I'll let her do it in this case. Sometimes it depends on the situation. But I'll go ahead and do the attack roll. Does she have anyone else targeted? Nope. So that bless is kind of helping. So 7 plus 4 is 15, so that's a hit. And now I'm going to double click the damage. Nice. So that did some damage to bandit number 2. Okay, so that was kind of cool. So now the human noble's going. He's basically going to try to take these guys out. So he's not giving up yet. And he's got his great axe out still. This time he's going to go for bandit number 2. And this time he rolled a 20. So Fantasy Grounds will automatically know to roll a critical hit in this case. So I'm going to go ahead and double click damage. Wait a minute. I didn't do the right one, did I? Yeah, I did the wrong weapon, but basically he still hit, and he didn't roll a crit, but that did 6 points of damage. I will just wing it this time. So I'm just going to roll, let's see, critical damage. What do you guys think? Should I just give him double damage, or just, I can reverse it and do it again. Maybe it's a good opportunity to show you this. All right, so what I'll do to fix this the right way, instead of manually doing it, is what you do here is, let's say you accidentally drag the wrong damage or something like this happens. So I want to reverse this. This is damage. So I want to reverse this. So what I'm going to do, it's going to act like a heal. So I'll right click, go to this plus or minus, which is going to turn this to a negative value. And then I'm going to drag and drop this onto the bandit, and that essentially heals him. Now what I'm going to do, so I can get the right damage, is in Fantasy Grounds, under the modifiers, you can click on this max damage or half, or you can do critical. So in this case, critical. And now I will drag the damage correctly this time, and I'll drop it on the bandit. And this time it's going to do the right damage. So there we go. So now he is dying. So that's how you correct an incorrect damage. If you accidentally drag the wrong damage or something unexpected happens, that's how you fix it mathematically in Fantasy Grounds. The GM could also intervene and do it manually. But in this case, we took that bandit out. He's dead. So be it. Move on. So that's his turn. So we'll advance it. So the Lightfoot criminal, he's still sneaking up. So I'm going to have him move a little closer. So he hears what's going on. He doesn't see the guy, I don't think. He can kind of see him. I'm going to have him move up 10 feet. Now I got to have him roll his stealth check. He's going in for the kill. Let's hope he's successful. Get all the way up there and miss. Okay, so stealth. I'm going to roll it in Dice Tower. And that's a pretty good roll. He doesn't notice him. He's still ready. So he loads up his crossbow, and he's going to shoot him on his next turn. So he moved up, positioned himself. He's steady. He's aimed. He's ready for the kill. So next turn, if this guy's still around, he's going to let loose. And he has to shoot through his ally, so he's going to have a penalty, more than likely. So we'll see. So now it's the bandit captain. He's going to, again, try to take out the human noble. This time he connects. This might be deadly, folks. And drag and drop this onto the human noble. And he's out. So he went down. Okay, he's dead, or essentially bleeding out. So he's going to move out. And as soon as he does, he notices that guy, but it might be too late. His turn is done. So back down to here. The human folk hero is going to take a pop shot at him to try to distract him. So I'm going to hold down the right control key, target the bandit captain, and then go to her character sheet, double click on the attack roll, and that connects. And now for the damage. Ooh, so maximum damage. So he's about almost halfway down there. He's about a third of the way in hit points. And that was her turn. So I'm going to have her move closer since her ally went down. So I'm going to have her move 20 feet, hold down the control key or the alt key. And that's her turn. So now the dwarf soldier is going to go. So he picks up his crossbow, loads it. Hopefully this time he hits. So I'm going to target the bandit. And this time, hopefully, his crossbow will connect. So go ahead and double click on the attack roll. And that is a hit. And now we're going to do that. So not a whole lot of damage, but they're whittling him down, so that's a good thing. So the high elf, I think I'm going to have her move over 1 square. And then she already has that guy targeted, I believe. No, she doesn't. So I'm going to hold down the right control key, click on the bandit captain, and she's going to do the same thing. She's going to double click on the damage for the crossbow. She rolled a 20, so she got a critical hit. These guys are getting lucky. And now double click on the damage. It should do it right this time. Yep, it did. Too bad she rolled so low, but she did get 5 points of damage in there. So this guy is halfway dead, or halfway out of there now, pretty much. So that's her turn. Human Noble rolls, but he fails the death save, so he's still bleeding out. Light. Okay, here we go. So I'm going to. This is the rogue. Going to do a sneak attack. So hold down the right control key and click. So got to make sure I got him selected. Okay. So this is the rogue. Go to his attack options. First, hopefully he hits. It doesn't roll a 1. Oh yeah, 26. So instead of just rolling regular damage, I'm going to apply the sneak attack. So this is going to give him more firepower here. So now that he's already hit, I'm going to double click this, and that should. There we go. So he did 10 points of damage with that sneak attack. So that's pretty hefty. So now it goes to the bandit captain. So now he's got to consider his options. So I think he'll close the gap on this guy. Probably recognizes him from the Thieves Guild. Says, "Why, you little..." So he'll engage with him and attack him for that. So I'm going to have him move. So I'm going to hold the control key or the alt key. So he closes the gap. And I'm going to have him just take a swipe at the rogue with his scimitar. Ouch. He rolled a 20. What is it with all these 20s? Okay, so this could be deadly. So he's going to take and drag and drop the damage onto the rogue. And does 6 points of damage, so he's out too. So this bandit captain's kicking ass. So he's basically taking out 2 people. So he's pretty deadly. So he's hurt, but he's hanging. So the human folk hero has to decide what to do. So how far is this guy away from her? So he's in range. I think I'm going to move up so he can't switch targets and go for one of these softer ones. So I'll have her move to him, and then she have to move through her ally, though. That's the thing. Well, I'll have her move over here and then take another arrow shot. At least we know that's going to be more likely to hit. So she moved over, and now I'm just going to have her roll her bow attack again, because at least she gets a better chance to do that. So that's a hit, and that's 9 points. So that's the maximum she can do there, pretty much. So that he's down, he's almost dead. So that's pretty good. So now the dwarf soldier is going to do his turn. So again, I'm going to bring up his character sheet. He's already got that guy targeted, I think. Yep, so all you got to do is double click on his attack roll. And you notice the bless is still there. Oh, another 20. What do you know? This is crazy. Now let's hopefully he gets a decent damage roll. Oh, yeah. He took him out. Oh, wow. What a battle. So the dwarf targeted him, did double damage, he rolled a crit, and now he's gone. So let me go through the rest of the rounds and see what happens. So High Elf is going to move up, or actually she's going to move over. So I'm going to have her, we're going to finish out the turn here. So she's going to see if anything else is going on, like check the area. When I move down, this automatically checked again, another death save failure. So he's got 2. So on his main sheet down here, he's got 2 failures. So if someone doesn't stabilize him pretty quick, he's a goner. Now I'm going to go ahead and hit this down arrow. The rogue succeeded in his death save. And now we'll go up to the top of the round. We'll just say this guy's not going to get rescued anytime soon, so he's out. And this individual is going to move over to him and try to stabilize him. What has she got? Anything? See if she's got any potions. Nope, nada. Now I'm going to have her do a medicine check, even though it probably isn't going to do anything, but at least she's trying to stop the bleeding. So that's all I'm going to say. So just because she's not proficient doesn't mean she can't bind the wounds. So we'll see what she rolls. So he's pretty hurt, so I don't know what to stabilize him would be. I'll just roll and see what she comes up with. But I'll drag and drop that in the dice tower. And then narratively, I would say, you're trying to stop the bleeding, but it's like, you put your hands down and the blood is running through your fingers, so it's not really helping much. So she didn't roll very well, so that's the narrative of the given in that case. Going to the next round, this guy is going to go up to kind of the same thing. Have him open up his thing here. What has he got? So he's used up all of those. So I'm going to have him do a medicine check too. So he's proficient with it, so maybe he'll have better success. Let's see. So medicine check. Drop it in the dice tower. It's not a bad roll. So what I will rule in that case is he's able to stop or slow the bleeding down. Let's put it that way. So he's not going to bleed out. I'd go ahead and make him stable, but he's far from out of the woods. Basically, he can't be moved or anything. Otherwise, he'll start bleeding again. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, I'm going to drag the stable effect onto him. So down here, I think there's a stable. Yeah, so drag stable onto the human. And he's still unconscious, still prone, but now he's not going to bleed out. So we'll go ahead and hit this down arrow. I think she's going to come over and try to help with the... I'm going to give them each one chance to do it. So she's going to go to her skills. She doesn't have medicine, but we'll see what she rolls. So she's going to kneel down and try to help. She rolled a 20. So how would you... I guess she stabilized him. What the hell, man? This is awesome in this case. So I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing. I'm going to drag the stable. So she kind of lucked out, but I'm going to drag that stable so that he can't bleed out anymore. So when I hit this down arrow, it's not going to roll to see if they die or whatever. So that's what that does. It stops that. So she helps staunch the bleeding. And now what those two will do is they'll tell the folk hero to go inside to get some help. So Lightfoot is recovering or stable. She's going to go run into the tavern and get some help. So basically, that's the end of the scenario. That's how I would have ran that. I don't know if that helps any of you, but that's kind of sort of the back and forth that you'll get during these encounters. Now, since the thugs are taken out, whether they surrender or they die or whatever, you can award the experience. So this one was worth 525. So in the party sheet, since they made it through here and everything, you can go to the XP tab, and under Encounters, you would drag this data in there. So when it's time, you click Award, it splits those up amongst the party evenly. That's how you award that. Now, if you made a parcel for treasure, or if they have loot, you can also do that and put that out there and give them a few coins, maybe some stuff they can sell. At lower levels, that really helps out. But anyway, so that's basically the way this combat works. And then when you award them, you get that. And then if you had items like loot, then you would put those in the loot section, and then you could sell it or divide it out. If there's any coins, that'll go to your players. So that's essentially how that goes. So hopefully that helps a little bit. I don't know how helpful it is. It's kind of a long video, but just so you guys can kind of see how that played out, and you see behind the scenes of what the GM's job is and how that works. And see, I made some calls. Like maybe you wouldn't have done it the same way, but at least I made a call. And some of that stuff made it seem like a little cheating or something like that. But in the name of play, you kind of have to make concessions sometimes. And you want to make sure everyone has fun and everyone's not killed off. And I like the idea that the players almost died, but they didn't. And I gave the party a chance to do their thing, and they were close enough and they had enough time to go over and heal their friends. So I thought that was really good. I got lucky because usually it ain't that cool. Rolled a lot of 20s. I think we rolled 4 or 5 of those criticals today. So that was key. That made it a lot more interesting, a lot less time, and a lot funner. So rolling 1s and rolling 20s are probably the funnest part of the game in this rule set, anyways. So hopefully that helps you guys, with your games and to understand kind of the process, I guess. Everything's gonna be different in every game, so it's gonna be, but kind of the same thing. The main thing I wanted you to know is to have the map where you can see everything, and you can see how I have these things all stacked up so that you can access their information without them being spread across everywhere. And then also just having everything at your fingertips and have everything in its place. That way you're not struggling, you're not digging through the interface. And then here I can lock this map, right click and expand it back out. And then at the aftermath, we might switch to a different map. Maybe they'll all have a map of the interior, and we'll switch to that map. Maybe we'll rest here for the night. If there was any loot, as the GM, I can tell the players, you find a few coins, a couple daggers, I can make that as, later as the party is resting. You don't have to have that handy like right now. Maybe in your prep, you can go ahead and make a parcel or just add a couple coins to that sheet, whatever you want to do, and to the party sheet. So you could drag the stuff directly to the party sheet, or you can make a parcel and award it that way. But you got, it won't take you that long to do that. And if you have a fancy module or some tables, you can roll on those and make, generate treasure that way. So it just depends on what material you have and your comfort level. But I don't know if you guys noticed this, but the map has a little bit of animation that I put on there. So this is some smoke that's coming out of these chimneys. Let me turn off the line of sight. So that's just, this is a static map, but what I did is I just added a couple animated assets here on the map. But let me turn off the line of sight so you guys can see that a little bit better. So this is with all the lighting off. And see, I have this dust kind of stuff going, and then there's these smokestacks over here that has the smoke coming out of them. There's one up here too. So this is the inn right here. It's probably the kitchen, the fireplace, the upstairs bedrooms, like the different things to keep the place warm. And then these are just buildings, so you can't see through them, but if you're to go on top, you can make it so they can see up there if they climbed up on the roof. I was going to have the rogues, one of them up on the roof, like shooting down on them, but I didn't want to make it too complex. And what's kind of neat is these little things, these blood splatters, now we can go back and say, okay, the bodies were there, so that kind of thing. If you want to get rid of those blood splatters, there's a clear death marker. So you can click that, it'll clear that, it'll clear the map. So anyways, folks, take care. Have a good week.